he up to these days?
I met him at a Scepter launch event.
Oh, okay.
Scepter, it's a semantic knowledge representation and programming environment. And we seemed to have some interest in common. Then he found out that there was this thing called COI, Community of Impact. So he reached out and wanted to have a conversation.
Okay.
So that turned into kind of an interesting exploration of common interests. So that I thought I'd share that with my amigos.
Great. Love to hear about it.
You know him?
Particularly like to hear about that program.
Yeah, you don't have to actually watch the video, but we touched on a number of topics. How well do you know Matt?
Jack and I got to know Matt in a group that I think Matt put together some years ago, a meetup. And I had contacted him just a few months back just to get some status, talk about something, but don't know him real well. But he knows me, I know him.
What's the group? What's the meetup?
The meetup was BCI. That would be, I'd have to go back down and see what it stands for. I've used the initials for so long. I can tell you. And it was, I was impressed with the people that were in the group. And what was important to me was monitoring how some of these people are growing and developing and so on. Some of the stuff they're working on. It's kind of fun to see that over time because they're some productive folks there doing some good stuff. So you might want to talk to me. I'll give you the name right now. It's one of my meetups. BCI is, let's see what it's called. Daily activity. Let me look there. I hope I have it more than initials. No, I don't. Gone. Huh. It's nice to know the name, but look it up in my. There's got to be some document in that file that spells it out. So let me take a look again. Yeah, some of the names in the group. Matt was the guy that headed it. Jack was active there. Travis Wellman, Thatcher Peskins, Megan Murray was there for a while, but it was Harlan T. Wood whose work really I was very impressed with in the beginning. I have not seen the progress I was hoping to see, but that's beside the point.
Can you send me a link to that meetup?
Yeah, I'm looking. Well, the meetup's no longer in existence, but or it may have been. I don't know. I don't know the status, but I will get the link right now. Let me just dig into that part of my files.
Dino had a pretty intense day yesterday, so I don't know whether he's actually going to be available today.
Yeah, I caught that comment. Yeah, what's that about?
Dino felt that he was not at his best yesterday, so he did not want that shared.
Oh, all right. Very good. Understand those things. Okay. Meetups. Okay, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, I wrote more materials on this meetup, but long ago gave up its name, and I couldn't even tell you where to find it anymore. BCI stands for is important because that's the name under which you would find it. All right, come on, where are you? BCI. Build the collaborative internet. That's it. And I will give you the, let's see. You can probably find it faster than me at this point, but that's what it was. Build the collaborative internet.
Okay.
And I don't know whether it exists or not. Let's see. Come on, where's my link? Come on. We physically met at just a moment. I just lost it. You might want to ask about the tech shop. Yeah, the tech shop is where Matt was working at the time. He's changed now. He's got his own business. Well, which you probably know more about than I do. Darn it. Yeah, I don't find the link to the site at the moment. I have it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Just curious as to why it's so difficult to find, because that's usually I have a way of organizing it, so I find it instantly.
Okay, so
be it. All right.
I'll look into it. I actually got basically a 75-minute intro. Well, we each got a 75-minute intro to each other's interests. So,
okay, good.
About his terminology, his model, the words he uses, and so we talked about Dictopedia because, of course, we each were using different language, and we were trying to map our language. So that's actually a reinforcement of the Dictopedia idea in my mind.
Good.
Okay, so other than working on the house, Stan, any thoughts for what you're focused on or would like to push in these Amigos calls?
Possibly. Two things. One, I wanted to mention that about 2 weeks ago, I believe it was on a Monday, you had provided an outline relative to a time browser. It was fairly in-depth outline. And what struck me at looking at that was that it was potentially a good map for training an AI process to interact with that, but that's kind of way over here. That's just my interest. My other interest, you've heard me use the word context, and I'm very interested in the concept of context, and I said I would get back to you on it, and I've put what I could squeeze in here till today, some time thinking about it, and realized that it's both complicated, wide open, and probably the use of word context really only has meaningful relevancy while you're in a conversation and wanting to see just a little bit beyond the borders of someone's thinking at that moment in time. But context has multiple levels, and I'd like to try to map out, this seems to be an uncharted territory. I'd like to kind of map out a little bit the kinds of contexts that exist to see what it suggests. Because my big vision was that as we move towards the era where AI plays a heavier part in our lives, that we develop this avatar, that is the machine entity that kind of does a lot of interfacing for us, more so than it does today. And in so doing, in order to truly interface and facilitate communications between individuals, I thought of the idea that it would be communications would be listened to at all times by the avatar, which is already an existing idea. That avatar kind of peeks in on everything. And that avatar would then help interpret other people's stuff in the context of the user, and likewise transmit to other users' avatars, who in turn have to do some maybe language translation to boot, but also other types of contextual translation. So I saw context as something that will be an area to work on related to AI in the future, related to communications. And I became keenly aware of something I had not noticed before, and that was in our group, we are constantly talking across each other. And that is good. It's appropriate, it's expected now that I understand it, because we all come at a topic with our separate contexts. Here's the call it an issue, if you will, and that is that you and I can talk for quite a few minutes, like you did the other day with, well, you had a longer dialogue, and beauty of being able to just sit and listen to that was you were having an exchange that went far more in depth. In casual conversations in a group, we're forever fighting the issue of context. We just have to shut up and listen, because we don't have time to really explore every detail without, improperly interrupting the next person's thoughts. So that's the limitation of a group. There's plenty of pluses to a group dynamic, but that's sort of the limitation, is the inability to go in depth on something that's important to me, let's say, but maybe not important to everybody else. So that's something we can explore at a later time.
No, that's an important issue. And I think, we each come with, as you say, different degrees of depth in a particular domain.
Yes, exactly.
We touch on so many different domains. On some, you're an expert, I'm not. On some, I might be more expert, you're not. And
Exactly.
so each of us is basically struggling to fill that understanding gap.
Yep. Well said.
As we're hearing what someone is actually saying, okay? And we don't yet have the ability to hit the pause button, go and double click on that term, learn about that term, come back, and then hit the play button again, right? That's not in real time.
You've summarized it better than I could. That's good. And I do feel that ought to be on our list of to-dos, coming to just look at that more so to see what might be done to help facilitate. I don't know an answer to that because in streaming conversations, there just is not time unless we had at our side our, let's just call it avatar, that was able to kind of grab the pieces of something relative to us, our thinking. Good morning.
Good morning.
No, that's a good point, Stan. Dino, I just wanted to let you know Stan was in the middle of a good point here. And so I just wanted, Stan, you to make sure that you had a chance to wrap it up cleanly.
Well, the wrap up is that I think that our group is probably as good as any, if not better, at addressing this ultimately. All I ask in the name of explication is that it be on our master list of topics to consider, and the right time will show itself when we want to really dig into that.
Would you be willing to take a shot at drafting it up first cut?
Well, okay. I guess I am already trying to figure out how to do it, and the more I dig into it, the more I realize it's...
Well, this thing right now, the last 5 minutes will be recorded, will have been recorded, will be available. As you note, I try to post these things.
Good.
You will be able to refer to what you said as you try to write it up later, right?
Well, I like the way you summarized it, so I may borrow your words. Okay.
Hey, Dino, are you still there? You disappeared.
No, I'm here, but I didn't quite understand what was the story, what was the issue. I can see it later, of course. You don't need to repeat it.
Okay, so let me do a 30-second summary for you, okay? How come you turned the video off, Dino?
I'll turn it on. I'm just fixing myself a drink.
Oh, this early in the morning? Come on. I'm just kidding. Hey, so anyway, the point, Dino, can you hear me?
I hear you all right, yes.
Okay, so the point is this. I'm going to do a quick summary. Is that in a group setting, Stan points out that each of us, thank you, is at different levels of understanding in different domains. So in our conversation, if it touches on a lot of different topics, on some, you're expert, I'm not. On others, Stan's an expert, I'm not. On others, I'm an expert, and perhaps others are not. And each of us needs to address that gap of understanding, but we have a difficult time addressing it in real time because we can't hit the pause button and go and look up that term or go study a field and then come back and then hit the play button and continue. We can't do that in real time. So Stan was addressing that as a real issue in group dynamics and in group interactions. And I thought that was a valid point, and I was asking Stan to write that up.
It is very much a valid point. I was wondering if there is a proposed solution.
I think we actually have to invent that grand pause button.
Grand pause button, yes. Or we'll deal with this offline button, and here's the material.
That's right, where I put everybody else on pause, and I go off and spend 5 minutes saying, geez, what did Dino mean by polyscopy? And then 30 years later, come back and say, okay, continue, Dino.
But speaking about that, shall we dive into the triangle story?
That was the proposed discussion today.
Shall we do that? Stan, are you okay with this?
Of course, but I'm 2 days out, not in touch with you guys, so I have no context and I haven't done any background. So just understand, I'll be just listening mostly and asking questions.
Right. Anyway, there is no thing to recover context because yesterday's recording was not shared. It was not even saved. Okay, so we don't have any record of what happened yesterday.
Okay.
So we'll just have to launch into this. And basically the agenda, as I understand it, as proposed, is we'll take polyscopy, we'll take COI ideas, and if possible, take the evolutionary learning lab or evolutionary learning community ideas and try and figure out how those three different models or frameworks can hopefully create a somewhat more complete, if possible, or somewhat more comprehensive or inclusive framework so that we each feel that those are represented in the final product. Dino, how would that be for a characterization?
That is perfecto. We can even pick up the conversation from yesterday where it took off into the boonies. And that was the point when Sam asked Dino, okay, obviously you have not been able to communicate polyscopy for all this time. There must be something missing in polyscopy, okay? So have you thought about that? And that's probably the point. I have thought about that, and that's so, you know, we are not necessarily losing the conversation yesterday. We use it as a springboard for today's conversation, which will be better informed than yesterday.
I hope you understand that was an intellectual question, even though I know that it felt like a personal attack, you know?
No, totally. I feel it's actually a good beginning of today's conversation, because these things can fill up one another. And here I feel like I might have not the domain of expertise, but something that I have been thinking about for a long time. Exactly how these three things may meet, right? And I feel I can also do a good enough job federating Alexander, because I have been studying his work quite a bit and his thinking, and also the people around him.
Okay, so
triangle, not just an edge.
I am very curious how this conversation is going to unfold, and in particular, I'm looking forward to later roping in Alexander for a subsequent conversation so that he can verify and or add to whatever it is that we're going to create.
That's perfect. I think, yes, I like the challenge of interpreting Alexander and then seeing what he will have to say, because that's a great way for us to communicate also.
Right. So I'm going to take the liberty of sharing my screen. So hopefully you see my screen now. And I'm going to put a few ideas up here. I'm going to put COI over here. I'm going to put Polyscopy over here. I'm going to put Evolutionary Learning Labs ideas over here. And the position, of course, is irrelevant. But hopefully we'll get deeper into these things and start making connections. And I'm really curious to see how this will unfold. Do you see my screen?
I see your screen. I think it's great. I like the triangle.
Good. So Dino, please, as you say, you've studied polyscopy, you've thought about this question, you've worked with Alexander, you understand ELL pretty well. Why don't you lead us and get us started?
Very good. I can, I have been thinking in terms of the general story and also in terms of federating Alexander. And polyscopy I have been federating for a while, so maybe enough about this for a moment. Maybe not, I don't know. But let me pick up the general story, the general, how I see the problem domain.
How do these three interact? How do they reinforce each other? How do they complement each other, or do they? That's the big question here.
They do. Somehow.
Hey, Stan, there's a lot of shuffling going on. Would you mind going on mute while you're not speaking?
You bet. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
So let me pick up the story from the system science part, from the evolutionary learning lab.
Okay.
And then I can dance a little bit around the general kind of using polyscopy to highlight what is in the moment, in the sense of the big global picture. And then I sketch how COI and polyscopy fit into that, and I hope to do all of this within 10 minutes.
Okay.
And you're welcome to interrupt me at any point, because don't let me monologue too long. Okay, so the story about system science in 1 minute. Wiener and Bertalanffy. Bertalanffy comes from biology. Wiener comes from more technical, mathematical kind of sciences and so on. So there was this group of people meeting in New York and created cybernetics and all that, right? They had the big major point, and by the way, the point of our Wiener's paradox article. And the point is that evolution of the human systems and control of human systems cannot proceed based on the survival of the fittest. It leads to some kind of disaster, and this is how I see non-sustainability in a nutshell. Now, this way of thinking had its evolution. I'm really condensing. I hope you can, basically, because I don't want to give the long history of things. So just in a nutshell, we can unpack then things as you go along, right? Mm-hmm. So there are certain interesting moments. I like the story of Erich Jansch because he was a brilliant guy, totally in tune with things. And he started also from a more or less technical perspective, but very quickly discovered this humanistic perspective, or evolutionary perspective. And the basic insight is, yes, we need to recreate human systems. But at this point, since we don't have a way to recreate the human systems because they have, nobody has the power to go in and change the money system or the governance and so on and so forth, right? We need to think in evolutionary terms. We need to evolve. And Erich Jansch was very much representing this evolutionary line of business. And so were the people Alexander worked with. Now, Banati is an example, right, who really had some great things to say. But Alexander happened to be working basically, including his own father, right, with people who, in the best way, represented this whole general evolution theory or evolutionary system science. And there came a point in the evolution of the of general evolution theory where people basically understood, okay, so we have to evolve in a different way, this and that, quite a bit of knowledge was, but so what now? And what now was, okay, so we now really have to stop talking about this evolution, we have to start evolving, right? We have to start building. And so in a kind of a mathematical way, right? I'm a mathematician more, I think Alexander is more a humanist, right? So he has maybe a different language. He has a very quick and profound mind. So he was basically able to condense all this together, this whole history and the whole trajectory, which I like to say he was with from day one. Because as I said to Annette, when his father took him in his hand the first time, he whispered evolutionary system theory into his ear. Alexander was laughing. He said that it was not quite like that, but okay. In any case, and so the point of the story is that that this whole thing evolved to the point where the evolutionary learning tribe, or something like the evolutionary learning tribe, was just the next natural step. And the next natural step was that instead of talking about how evolution should be and how it might be and so on, system science is evolved directly in designing for evolution. And we are involved in curating emergence for drivability. Obviously, Alexander thought about this for a long time. He's quite good at language, right? So curating emergence for drivability is, in 4 words, basically the whole big story that I'm telling you. It's the approach where you're not intervening into systems and saying, okay, guys, stop using money as it is, you do something else. You don't do it like that, right? You basically, a system science. So this is kind of like the presence of system science in the world, right? The system science is observing what is happening out there, recognizing memes, recognizing innovations, ways of being that are transformative or that are crucial. Because it has already the whole apparatus of observing what is conducive to thrivability and what is not, what are the lacking elements. And then augmenting them, as Doug would say, right? Doing something, possibly feeding them back into the system with, some equipment so that the system, so that they grow, right? This is like tending the plants. You kind of like in a garden, and you see basically the kind of things that you want to grow and you water them, right? And these other things maybe you don't water, or you see. So that's basically and then the question is, well, we might need some equipment for this, right? Internet may help, and we may need to build tools and so on and so forth. And this is where the Amigos fit in perfectly, and you know, all us techies can basically, in a very natural way, help this. So we are right there. So in a certain way, we're redesigning the paradigm for the system science by adding or augmenting the paradigm of the system science by adding actual presence in the system, actual creation of systems, and so on, to the existing repertoire of action in the system science. Let me press the pause button and then catch some breath and see if you have any questions, and then I can go on and tell you how these other things fit in. Or rather, the plan was to say a little bit about the big picture and then how these other things fit in. Go ahead.
I'd rather not ask any questions until you sort of figure out how Polyscopy and COI connect into this. On the other hand, if you think that I've missed something here, please let me know. These intros, by the way, are not meant to be final, obviously. You know, I've been trying to capture this as best as I could, just hearing you speak. But hopefully this will remind us what was said, and then we can go back and correct this later. But anyway, I'm just trying to capture some of the big concepts or the big memes that you were speaking about. But I'm not going to ask any other questions until you finish connecting the dots with Polyscopy and COI.
No, this is great. Give me 3 to 5 more minutes, and then we can switch into dialogue or conversation mode.
Okay.
Some of the elements of the big picture that I wanted to highlight, right? So by lifting up, let's say that Polyscopy is very much about lifting up the insights and then weaving them together into another kind of, so, you know, there is this change of meta-narrative that wants to happen, needs to happen, right? So I would like to highlight just 2 elements, 2 people that you know, we might lift up, and they're really, really telling us something. Because, you know, out of you can say a crowd of wonderful, totally insightful, amazing people out there who figured out things that can change our civilization forever, right? And really get us on a not only sustainable, really thrivable or thriving course. So let me just highlight 2 people. One is Joel Bacon. He was, or he is still a law professor in Canada. He is Bacon, B-A-C-A. B-A-C-A-N. Joel Bacon.
How do you spell his first name?
I'm not sure if it's, I think it's B-A-K-A-N. I think it's Joel B-A-K-A-N. In any case, if you Google the corporation, so he created this book and the film. It's a 3-part documentary, very long, wonderful one. Took him 7 years to produce. But you know, being this creative guy, he's also a jazz you can say jazz musician. His lady is a jazz singer, Rebecca, wonderful lady. Anyways, so Joel Bacon, he produced a book to federate the insights, which is the documentary, which he thought was totally crucial, right? At the point when he was in Oslo, he was also lobbying to show this movie to the American Congress. So this is big deal, right? And what is the big deal here? I'll just highlight one snapshot from the movie. Okay, so there is a shark. There's footage of the shark, and you see the shark, this lean, long, dangerous animal swimming in the ocean. And the speaker is saying the corporation has evolved to be a phenomenally efficient externalization machine. Externalization is a great word here. You know, we can talk about robbery, we can talk about stealing, But this is not that, right? It's legal extraction of money from people, extraction of goods from the environment. So the point of the story is that the corporation has evolved to maximize the profit to its shareholders and to externalize the costs. And the costs are not just money costs, they're also environmental, they're human costs, they're all kinds of costs. I'm highlighting this in this context because this is how we have evolved, right? All along, Joel is saying, look, the corporation is the most powerful institution in the world. Can we afford to live with the most powerful institution in the world, which has this pathological character? He then goes into psychoanalyzing the corporation and develops the whole story. It's a lovely movie. You have to see it.
It's by design a very simplified, very primitive model.
Of course. This is what federation is about, right? But he is making a huge point, right? The corporation takes all of us people in, and these are institutions, right? I'm just highlighting one, and we could highlight anyone. But the point of the story is that the corporation is something that takes our daily work and turns it into socially useful or not effects, right? So it's this big machinery, and the question is, how has this big machinery evolved? And the answer is in not so good way. We can talk about this further, but let me highlight another, just pull out another character from my box of characters. This is Pierre Bourdieu, brilliant and you can say influential, but in sociology circles, sociologist, philosopher, ended up even being an activist toward the end of his life, who he was not originally trained as a sociologist. He became a sociologist by in a way, rediscovering sociology. And this was when he was in Algeria, right? The long story is very interesting. But what he discovered at that point was something that he framed as the theory of practice. And this is how the society really functions. And the theory of practice is all about symbolic. It's about symbolic power, symbolic capital. And the point of the word symbolic, and he has his own terminology. He adapted some words like habitus, which were there for a long time. And so the point of the story is that power among people happens in a way, not exclusively, of course, but in a major and possibly in a predominant way, happens in a way that nobody is really conscious of, not the people exercising power, not the people suffering from disempowerment. It happens kind of automatically. Now, I say ... Let's not develop the sociological series at this point, but let's just put these two things together, right? And what we see is the root of all evil in a way. And the root of all evil has been that our evolution can become pathological, and it has been becoming pathological without any conspiracy, without our awareness. It's just the way things are, right? It is actually just the way we have been evolving as civilization from the beginning of time. I can tell lots and lots of stories about this, right? But let me just now say how I see basically the situation, our situation, right? And our situation is, I believe that creative ideas, creative impulses really do happen like that, right? This is the elephant. Now I'm describing the elephant in very, very concise terms. And now I'm going to say that each one of us, 3, possibly 4 and 5, see a certain part of the elephant, see the elephant from a certain side and say, okay, this is what we need to do, right? But I'm trying to describe the elephant, and the elephant is basically pathological evolution. And then how I see our specific ways of being in that problem space, of contributing, is I see the community, I see, let me go back to Alexander, right? The evolutionary learning tribe as saying, okay, evolution has gotten out of hand. Actually, if we really want to be sustainable, survive a civilization and so on, we need conscious evolution. And conscious evolution was very much the lead theme of Bela Banati, with whom Alexander was working for many years. I think Bela Banati was also, 2 times the president of the ISSS and so on and so forth. So he's quite a prominent member of the community. And then naturally, Alexander has inherited this and said, okay, but let's do it, right? Because I think Banati was, he was writing lots of books, having a circle where people were discussing this and so on and so forth. But I didn't see much of intervention in Banati's repertoire of things. And so Alexander wants to bring this further, right? And so that's what it is. It's how conscious evolution can really be facilitated. And as I see it, our SIG is all about that, right? And now add a little bit Doug's Nick of Nicks, and this is what the SIG basically, how it's phrased now, how it's framed, how it's described with this a little bit renewed description that we created recently, right? It's a Nick of Nicks for conscious evolution, essentially. Okay, leave that aside. The community of impact, I think it's very clear how it fits into this space. Because what you're saying is, or what we are saying, don't mind that I credit you for most of the ideas, because I really see you much more an expert in how people come together into teams and communities, and because this is where you have been living and operating. And drawing from the incredible experience of Silicon Valley in bringing people together into successful or unsuccessful enterprises. And so, creating a kind of a rules of engagement, creating a kind of tools and practices of coming together in a good way. It's almost identical as what Alexander is doing, but it's also not, right? Because what you're doing is you're drawing from another realm of experience and maybe taking a little bit more proactive stance. And then what Polyscopy is basically saying the feedback and control, right? Especially the feedback that we have has not been very good. Polyscopy is I came into it as a theoretician, right? As a mathematician, as a person interested in fundamental questions. And so the fundamental question here is that our knowledge work or informing has also evolved. Oh, I have in Polyscopy, I'm obviously federating all of these people and ideas and things and creating kind of high-level concepts, which I feel can really be meaningful and can be a guiding light, right? Mountaintop view in this domain, right? Orienting the action, or bringing us together. And so in Polyscopy, I have created earlier a concept which is called power structure, which we can come back to if you want. But it's basically federating what Bourdieu was saying and what Joel Bacon was saying. So if you put these 2 things together, somehow you get a power structure. Let me not talk more about this. And then another way I federate these ideas is when I talk about homoludens. Now, homoludens is an even more popular kind of lightweight, cool way of framing what is happening right now. And the way of framing is we have maybe biologically evolved to have the capacity to be Homo sapiens. But socially we have evolved to become more and more homoludens. Man, the game player. We don't understand our games anymore. The games being, social systems, socio-technical systems, whatever brings us together and organizes us in the community or in the society or especially in the workspace. And so we have become oblivious of even the purpose of these games and surely so we basically just learn how to play by playing and we play, right? And this is just yet another way of framing this space and talking about non-sustainability. This cannot be sustainable. If these games are becoming destructive, we identify ourselves as game players, basically as compulsive gamers, right? We have this identity. I'm a company director. I want my company to be, and I want to be the richest guy around, and I'm going to drive this car and that car and so on. It becomes kind of a self-destructive, insane game, right? And in this framing, which is one of the strong points, I think, of Polyscopy, in this framing, this guy is no longer a winner, right? He's really, this is decooling this game. We don't want to be in the game with him and say, oh, you know, he's the 1%. He's outplayed us all. No, he's just a compulsive game player. And then we hope that some of these guys will wake up and basically join the re-evolution, which really needs to happen with all our resources that might be summoned, that might become available. This was you know, a modern painting kind of sketch. I hope that something is recognizable, but I try to be as brief as possible. Samuel, I don't hear.
Dino,
Yes.
this is quite good. I really appreciate you taking the first stab at this and really kind of connecting all these dots here. It would be curious to get your feedback on what I've created just by listening to you here, and to see whether or not it's something you can work with. Obviously, it's not going to be correct, but hopefully it's something you can work with later on. You recognize you started here, migrated over here, had a conversation here, migrated over here, then the last piece was over here.
Right. Put in the power structure concept. The power structure concept is a design concept, right? It's not that there are these, oh, you have it, yeah. Right, and homo ludens, very good. And, yeah, okay, so I mean, how exactly these things dance together, that's something to be developed. But
Yes.
I feel, yeah, the basic concepts are there, and I'm curious if this made any sense to you, because I was really trying to be unbelievably quick.
It did. I mean, it's a good story. It's a narrative. Obviously, there's lots of questions that I could ask. There's lots of words that, you know, I could try and add to this. But I think it's a very, very good first painting of this abstract picture. Where I think I have some areas to contribute would be just here in this COI idea and what's really underneath it and how it's rich. It has a lot to do with the whole feedback mechanism that you've also indicated here in Polyscopy. So I would actually say there's a huge element of that here as well. You know, that's what the retrospectives are. That's what the personal accountability is. That's what, you know, holding oneself accountable to your peers and to yourself and being explicit and transparent is all about. So there's a lot of that here in the COI as well.
Yeah, this is something I'm especially fond of. You know, it will turn out that we don't see the trunk and the ear and so on. We really see the elephant, but just in a different way, in a different language. And it will be just very beautiful when you start describing, you know, more of COI. It will turn out that it has more or less the same structure as Alexander's view. Is just in a completely different language.
That's why I've wanted to have that conversation for probably over a year.
Yes.
Stan, I know you've been listening. It's probably good to have an impartial third party, since, you know, I am somewhat identified with COI, even though I think Dino is as well. And Dino is somewhat identified with Polyscopy, although he would believe that I am also identified with that. So I'd be curious to see how you hear and how you see this discussion unfolding.
Okay, I'm a step behind, so I'm looking at the basics. And I'm very interested in the fact that you've once again identified the fundamental human nature that exists, and that is the personal self-interest form that we all contain to some degree. Now, you speak of, or Dino was illustrating the corporate environment, and where the leaders have a direction they take towards profit and self-interest in that fashion. That's an overgeneralization, but that's reasonable. But I'm also kind of would prefer, personally, to start with that human condition and branch it downward into both governmental organizations and corporate or business organizations and other types of organizations as a common, and then start to look at how do the cultures in each of these different domains somewhat influence and change that fundamental human equation as of today in this society, because obviously there is no universal all-time answer to that. because I'm very aware of the difference between what, as an example, we're in politics right now, a lot of that stuff going on. So I'm very aware of the difference between what is said and what is actually happening. And that seems to be a common problem, as I see it, probably in most political systems. But I'm also seeing somewhat the same thing. We're seeing a movement in the corporate, at least in Silicon Valley, where there is genuinely, and you guys have spoken to it, some genuine value that's starting to emerge, where there's an interest in sustainability, in corporate responsibility to the larger system, more so than in the past. I think we're in an evolutionary cycle there. I don't know. But it's the theme that seems to be, I'm looking right now to see if I see it. The theme is the human nature in general, and then how it varies from person to person, organization to organization, culture to culture, and so on, institution to institution, varies, but at least that ought to be a component that is kept always alive inside of each of these organizational groups, as it were, or social groups. Over.
Shall I? Okay, so this is Stan. It's a most interesting angle. You're adding the human being, human nature, human culture to this scene, and surely it's a major element, and surely it's been changing also lately. And then let's maybe look around the corner and see what then be coming to the scene that is even more transformative, right, which will maybe accelerate this transformation or re-evolution. And you know, there are lots of things one could name, but since I named Bourdieu, I'll go back to him and just say, let me maybe just say what I'm talking about, and then tell you in his story how this came about, right? There is obviously an ideology which is slowly sinking, right? And as always, when these things happen, gradually, very gradually, we learn how to see things in a different way. And so part of this ideology has been that the human nature is like that, right? It's selfish. Everybody, we are no. It's the Darwin just fits somehow perfectly into this, and you know, some of the theorists of capitalism, such as Adam Smith and so on, or and you know how people interpret Adam Smith, which experts of Adam Smith say that it's also totally naive. But in any case, you know, things have been ideologized, and the ideology is we're all selfish, and then you know capitalism becomes, or you know, this kind of rough version of capitalism becomes the natural system, actually the only one that is natural. What Bourdieu was observing, this is how he became a sociologist, and he was observing what was happening in a place, concretely in Algeria. And basically two things, right? There was war in Algeria when he was there, this was 1950s. And the war showed the hidden face of French. Allow me to use this word. I know that it's, again, ideologically loaded, but let me just use it in kind of a clinical way. I'm not trying to, I'm personally really completely, as much as I'm able, free of any ideology. So don't label me as socialist, Marxist, capitalist. I'm really believing in just one thing, and that is the paradigm shift. I want us to shift the paradigm and leave all these labels and things behind, right? And so I have to use some kind of word that is recognizable. So French imperialism basically showed its face through torture, so I mean, all kinds of unimaginable things, right? And somehow, long story short, Bourdieu was able to really penetrate into the story. Now, I'll tell you how, right? He wrote a book, being there, I mean, okay, long story short. He wrote this book in a series called Cassage, which is kind of like for dummies, contemporary English version of book series. And he wrote Algerian War for Dummies, sent it to France, right? And told really the story, what is happening in Algeria. It was quite an influential book. You know, French intellectuals basically saw their own country in a different way. But this opened him the door in Algeria because he became a person, totally trusted person. So he could speak to people who were tortured, he would speak, you know, so he became an insider in Algerian culture. In that way, he was able to really dig deep and see what is happening, right? And one of the things that were happening, he was studying the Camellia Tribe. people living in the Asian kind of tradition and joining capitalism, right? And there, what was once a functional, he calls it habitus, right? Functional way of being, functional mores, functional honor, functional way of being human and on having interhuman relationships. When these people came into the city to look for a job, this became totally dysfunctional, right? Because American movies were there before them, and even the ladies who would, back in the village, appreciate them totally. They would be like, dream men for them. Now they were no longer good enough because they were not even walking the right way, not speaking the right way, not wearing the right clothes, and so on and so forth. And then, Bourdieu saw how powerful these things are, really, as transforming, and it's not anybody's in anybody's power to undo them. So what I'm saying, I'm sorry for taking so long, but I hope this is meaningful, right? What I'm saying is that we will discover that what we think is the human nature is really the product of a long evolution of human nature, and that we as humans have capacity for immense love, for immense selflessness. So my sense is that we are going to rediscover culture, and then in particular discover the interplay between the culture and the social structures, right? And this is really what the core, I think, the core theme of conscious evolution is. It is understanding that well-being or thriving or whatever you want to call it, right, is deeply how we are. And by the way, this is part of the power structure model, how we are, right? It's an essential triangle, part of the triangle. But understanding that if we want to live better, simply, we have to change these structures that are making us inhuman. Over.
I'm going to riff on that theme, okay? And I'm going to suggest that the shift comes with a phenomenon that I'm going to describe. And I'm not sure whether this phenomenon is central or is peripheral, but I think it's necessary. And I'm going to describe it like this, okay? In the John Nash, Adam Smith capitalism model, we are these very selfish, or at least self-interested beings who are just trying to optimize our own survival, in a sense, okay? And so what we have is an entity with some capacity for execution, with a brain, an ability to have a concept of self and what self wants, what the surroundings can provide and what the self wants. So that's the simple model. There's an entity, there's a brain, there's a notion of need, there's a notion of want, there's a notion of where to get it. I propose that what is fundamentally a shift here is a new model where in ourselves as entities, we do not just have a model of ourselves and our wants and our needs in the system, but I also have a model of Dino as an entity, of Stan as an entity, of my connected peers and my neighbors as entities, all of whom are first-class objects in this world, just like I am. So I have to have this notion that Dino has wants and needs, just as I have wants and needs. Stan does as well, Frodo does, Gail does. And I have to think about the implications of what I do. So in the selfish model, I go out there and I take something from the environment, and sometimes it's a zero-sum game, and therefore, if I take something, somebody else loses. This is the profit extraction model of capitalism, okay? When profit is extracted, and it's on this escalator, it's this very fast escalator that goes all the way up to the 1%, to the 0.01%, everybody else down here at the bottom has lost. That capital has disappeared from them. It's no longer there to circulate and feed the economy and get people fed and get infrastructure created, right? So what I'm proposing is, rather than a simple model where we each have a concept of self, we each now have to evolve to having a concept of self and others. And that is a level of sophistication that is immense. People who are just struggling to survive may not be capable of saying, geez, if I give up this loaf of bread, I'm going to starve, my kids are going to starve, that's not possible for the people who are on the brink of extinction. It is a privilege and a responsibility for those who do have the means to think this way, who can say, I have a notion of the world not simply as myself and everything that I can grab, but it's myself and who else I can actually be interacting with, so that we can create this community that is a thriving community where every one of us is thriving. We're actually supporting each other, and we're together anti-fragile, because if that person is starving, I'm going to feed that person because I don't want that person to starve. So I think fundamentally the paradigm shift, at least one of them, is going from a sense of self to a sense of self plus others, and knowing the implications of actions, decisions, beliefs, systems, flows, consequences, etc. That, I propose, is at least one paradigm shift that is necessary in all of this. Over.
Very much so. Sorry, Stan, I'm, I'm excited. I'm jumping in. I'll let you speak. Stan, you're muted, I think. Stan.
Oh, sorry, I just said, go, yeah, please go for it. I thought I lost you guys, but it was me that got lost. Okay. Yeah, I'd like to just add quickly an illustration to what Sam was saying that has troubled me somewhat deeply for some years. I have a son-in-law who does not belong to the same political party as I do, or used to belong to anyways. We got into a simple discussion about, I said, well, I think we're paying too much taxes. And my context to that, this is the issue of context I was talking about earlier. My contextual thinking at the moment was, we've got a lot of misuse of government, a lot of misuse of money in the public sector. We don't need to pay as much to get good government in theory. That was just a theoretical statement. His comment was, oh no, we're not paying anywhere near enough taxes. And so I asked him the question, well, how much is enough? And he said, well, more or less, I don't recall his exact, there's no such thing as too much. And then I got it. I suddenly got that there is, what we're pointing to is, there are these existing mindsets that are socially spread, and they cause us to stop thinking. Obviously, there's no such thing as there's never enough taxes to be paid. We're always looking at balance. And as Sam said, we cannot go out and feed everybody all at once, but we can move in that direction of elevating and seeing to it that people are suffering less over time. But theoretically, we could take all our wealth, maybe for a short period of time, feed everybody well, but then what does that do to the rest of the system? So, and I don't know the answers. I'm just saying it is that the topic that I could never seem to bring up in these kinds of political conversations was the concept of balance. What is the balance, and what is the direction to evolve toward the ideals, as opposed to just stating out now, I want revolution right now, I want everything to be this way. Over. I think that's what we can contribute in our conversations, is this explicit concept of always seeking and answering to balance by whatever set of values we collectively possess. Over.
Now, I had two things to say. Now I have three. I'll again try to be unbelievably brief. I have New Balance written here on my sheet. New Balance, the brand. New Balance, the theme, back to my original story about the evolution of the evolutionary system science. Essentially, balance is the theme of original orthodox cybernetics, right? Homeostasis. You want to keep things in some kind of reasonable regime or something or other. You want stability, right? And then Rianci's big epiphany when he met Ilya Prigogine at Berkeley was, it's not about stability, but it's about instability, because that's the essence of life. And the point here is that at this stage of the game, I believe we are evolving into a whole new stable regime. And then there are these 2 points of view, right? Because when I speak, I'm speaking with respect to that new regime. And any of the pieces that I may be naming when you put into the current regime, they don't somehow fit in. You know, maybe they're even bad, they're disastrous, right? I don't worry. I have the privilege. You know, you're more in the business, in the real world. You need to keep things going. I'm in the academia. My job is to maybe think the unthinkable, right? To think where this whole thing has to evolve to and how to do it. I'm not limited by keeping things going and so on. Number 1 and 2, and I'll let you gentlemen comment. As you were speaking, Sam, I was remembering Alexander. You know, it was as if he was speaking. He just speaks a different language, but he likes to talk about. He mentions it in quite a few places about 4 levels of looking at the world. In interpersonal, I guess. I don't remember exactly the words, but you know, from interpersonal to cosmic, and then there are these 2 in the middle. But it's the same, right? He's basically saying that we have to switch from looking at what we have been socialized into accepting as our interest into a much more comprehensive, not way of looking, but several ways of looking. And the last little thing about polyscopy, right? I started. This is back to human nature and the cultural evolution. I started polyscopy basically when I was, you know, after the dissertation, I was having 2 interests. One was algorithm theory and, you know, general academic interests. And the other interest was I was studying first martial art and Sufism from some really good people. And then I was studying very broadly anything that happens. Went deeply into Qigong and you know, I was really studying the whole periphery of the culture, which is sometimes called alternative, and discovering that in all kinds of stuff that is out there, right? Because there is no curation. Anything that emerges basically is okay. So you can find all kinds of things, right? But I was, I think, fortunate or lucky to come across memes that are truly, number 1, transformative, number 2, they're good culture, right? Good culture in the sense in which Picasso is good art, and or Mozart, and so on, right? Really deep, good culture. Deep culture about the human being, about human potential. And I was really avidly learning these things. I can say I was observing myself become a cultural mutant. And then, being also a tenured academic, I was feeling, okay, it is really my job to make sure that these memes have life, have prominence, right? Because isn't that essentially and somehow they don't fit into the academic repertoire of responsibilities or realms of action, right? So they're basically just left there to die. But they are transformative in the sense that they can teach us about what we can be, and they can lead us into the next phase of evolution. I started professionally working on polyscopy when I understood that the non-communication or ignoring or miscommunication is there for no good reason. It is there for historical reasons. This is when I read Heisenberg's Physics and Philosophy, and you can say saw the light, right? I saw that in a way, keeping these memes out, it is self-destructive, number 1, pragmatically, and academically, it is illegitimate. I said many things here, but I hope, gentlemen, you can deal with them somehow or sort them.
That's a lot to think about. I'm just...
Dino, I would like to ask you to reattend to this notion of evolving these entities. I mean, ourselves and our 8 billion compatriots. Evolving these entities from being just simplistic, self-centered beings to those who think about self and others. to me, that is actually a magnitude of complexity that I don't know whether we are all equipped to accomplish. And yet, we have to take that on. It is a responsibility if we, as representatives of the species, and even we as the species itself, is going to create ways to survive beyond the next several decades. So I think that that is one of the paradigm shifts. You know, it's perhaps only one of a few or several, but I think it is one that is necessary, and I would like to highlight that yet again. Over.
May I add a layer of definition to that? Excuse me. As far as I know, throughout society and history, it has always existed. But that there is the self-interest, of course, but also for the sake of the earliest tribes that got together, there was always an element of social, or whatever the proper word is, that people give a part of themselves to the larger group for their personal benefit, of course, but it is built in. So would we perhaps take those two elements that have existed for all time and merge them together and say, let's address each one as part of a system and see what we can do to accomplish what's not being accomplished, which is perhaps a better balance of group, caring about group more so than caring about self. I don't know. Is that more or less what you're already alluding to, Sam?
Let me point out the key difference in my mind, okay? And thank you for asking that question. And then I'd really like to hear Dino's thoughts on this. And that is, while it is true that in almost every survivable culture, there must be, let's say, the elder statesmen or the wise elders or the Congress or whatever you want to call them, the parents, someone has to think about more than themselves. They have to think about those around them that they are responsible for. But it has always been a subset. It has always been a privileged few. What I'm proposing is, can we expand that so that it's not just a few, but it's actually a natural evolutionary step that each of us has to attain that? That's what I'm asking. Over.
Gentlemen, absolutely. I don't think that we are probably a unique example in history of a culture that is founded on selfishness as the first premise. It's just unbelievable. Allow me two snapshots, two pictures. One negative, one positive. And so the first the negative one. The moment when I stopped following the news, I remember I was driving a car back in America, and at that time there was kind of beginnings of war in my former country, in Yugoslavia, and Gorbachev, who was then the Russian president, flew to mediate, and the speaker was interpreting, oh, Gorbachev is not doing so well in his country, so he's trying to get some political points by resolving some problems internationally. And I was saying, wait a minute. I mean, if anybody in this world deserves to have a positive image in politics, it's Gorbachev, right? So why take it for granted that this guy is just totally thinking, his own political points and not genuinely just trying to help? I said, okay, enough is enough. Image number two, right? In the Sufism that I studied, which was Dr. Javad Nurbakhsh, a really profound person and master. His interpretation of what Sufism is all about, it's all about selflessness. And then a surprise discovery which happened a year and a half ago, which I wrote about on the blog post that is now on top of my blog. There's going to be another one replacing it very soon. But the blog post is about Ajahn Buddhadasa, who discovered that the essence of Buddhism is precisely that. It's about selflessness. And what is selflessness? It is about a non-identification with oneself, totally. Now, when we say this, it sounds like some kind of weird ideology, something just, totally, not belonging to this world. The way to make sense of such things is when you understand them simply as praxis. as something, I call this symbolic environment, right? You immerse yourself into a certain environment and it transforms you. It transforms, first of all, your feelings. It transforms what you're able to feel. And this is the key, right? And the praxis is simply based on the experience and insight of lots of people in Buddhist tradition, not only beginning from Buddha. He was not the beginning at all. You know, this is the yogis and so on. And he learned from everybody around and then took, according to Ajahn Buddhadasa, a major step forward, and out came Buddhism, right? And then again, the basic essence of Buddhism was forgotten and got blurred in all kinds of metaphysical and other things, such as reincarnation, etc. But he took it out and highlighted. And just one snapshot, which it's going to appear in my next, it's the Garden of Liberation, right? I'm going to write a sequel to Garden of Liberation. And there was this moment when I was speaking in the retreats or the last evening. People speak about their experience, and I'll just give you a snapshot. I was saying, look, the world has these problems. They're so perplexing that even our best minds cannot really find solutions. There is, however, a simple and natural solution. And it's right here among us. Take this meme, and the place was created, you know, the Garden of Liberation, the Suan Mok international part of the monastery was created to spread this meme worldwide. I was saying this is where we are. If we take this meme and embed it into our reality, into our workplaces, into our homes, into our communities, the world will naturally, by itself, transform so that all these problems are basically taken care of.
So Dino, that last minute, could you restate that last minute? Because I think it's a major theme.
Of course, it's a very major theme. So, so the point of the story is that there is a fact which I consider has the value of scientific facts. Scientific in the sense that it's reproducible, it's understandable, it's simply a fact of life. It's something about human well-being, right? It's something about human, I don't like, I mean, the word happiness doesn't do justice to this, but it's about the pursuit of happiness, right? And what Ajahn Buddhadasa is essentially saying to our culture, you guys, you're just pursuing happiness in a totally wrong direction. Not just because you're destroying communities and you're destroying the environment. You're destroying yourselves. You're destroying your own ability to feel. And this is how it has to be. I'm obviously not paraphrasing in a good way. This is not his language, but let me federate him in this way. And so what I'm saying is that there is a meme, right? There is a fact, which when placed into our culture, can positively transform it. I don't know if you want more details on this or if this is, I'm just more or less repeating, just paraphrasing what I said.
What would that look like? Has he formulated such a meme and tried to distribute that in our society in some way?
Well, this is the most interesting question and most interesting part of the story. I'm actually beginning to believe that this is going to be our job, my dear sir, our job. It's going to be our job. You see, the project which is germinating in there, this is the Garden of Liberation project. We want to federate Ajahn Buddhadasa, okay? And what has happened is Ajahn Buddhadasa is speaking the Buddhist language. This is how he learned these things. This is how they make sense to him. This is how they make sense also to his immediate environment, right? Because Buddhism is a big deal in Thailand. So, you know, if he says, Buddha says X, people listen, okay? It's not the same with foreigners, but I have, I think, quite a beautiful, convincing way. This is going to be, as I said, it's going to appear in my blog whenever I have time to write it up. But the point of the story is going to be that Ajahn Buddhadasa hugely doesn't communicate. Not even, I think, I suspect not even to the monks who are there, but surely not to the international people. You know, it's just kind of, it's a crazy situation. It's a crazy story. At the same time, what he has to communicate is, as I already said 2 times, right? It's hugely transformative. And so, can we, create a way to communicate. Now see how the World Evolutionary Tribe fits in, right? This is exactly the mission, because the mission of the World Evolutionary Tribe is, there is a meme. Somebody out there has something that is transformative for the whole big human community. Can we take it out, transform it somehow, and feed it back into the system, right? This is also what Polyscopy or Knowledge Federation, I mean, all these buzzwords, they're really more or less the same story, right? We all see the same thing. We need to federate Buddhadasa, right? Federate can also mean, I'm sorry, just to clarify, right? It's not only him saying these things. When you look at, this is what I did in my blog post, right? In the end, it's about Sufism. But I'm trying to say, you know, what these different people around the world see is basically the same story, just written in very different languages. But when we federate, we draw out the essence, right? And then communicate this essence in a way which contemporary people in the West can understand. Create a movie, right? I mean, write a story, dance. Yeah, so.
I have a personal model of thinking that I've had for some time, and I think we all do in a sense. And I've, seen the world in terms of self, and I'll use your word well-being, in other words, myself, versus at all times selfless, meaning group well-being. That just seems to be there at all time. And at all time, we do kind of consider what to do in between to keep some form of balance that we personally look at, and then societies also help to define socially acceptable balances and so on. What I think has been missing is the term you've heard me use a lot, just because I enjoy using it, is explication. I think what's missing perhaps is that we understand the self and the group. That's a model we all carry. Let's add to it the third term, balance, for want of a better word for the moment, as an explicit concept that enters into the conversation, always keeping in mind that we are always reassessing balance between the two, and that is where our focus needs to be, really, in order to sustain a pardon the pun, balanced system, where both self and group are okay, because I've seen too much of the extremes. Over.
Gentlemen, I believe I will have to leave soon. Yes, this has been such an amazingly interesting conversation that I forgot about time, but I have to pick up Noah from kindergarten.
I hope that we can pick this up again either Wednesday or Thursday or Friday of next week, because I think this has been a great start. I'm very much looking forward to having Alexander join this conversation. Stan, I tried to put in this balance idea here. Obviously, everything here is just a placeholder for something better that comes along later. But this was actually another good conversation. I feel very good about mapping these ideas together. I think we have a good start. I think we're barely started, however. So I think there's much left to be done. But this was actually quite a good start. So thank you both.
Thank you both too. I also feel that way.
All right. Let's see. Sunday is MOAD day. Monday and Tuesday is DKR day / time browser day. Wednesday next week hopefully is collaborology day. Next Thursday we already have an agenda for Polyscopy day. So realistically, if we could actually continue this conversation next Friday. Oh, actually next Friday I'm not going to be here, unfortunately.
Oh,
that's a clinic day. Anyway, so we can either decide to use it one of the Wednesdays or Thursdays, or we can actually have it the following week.
Right. I think it would be great to hear, for example, Alexander or David, if he can join us.
Definitely. Okay. All right. Thanks. I think we're back to guys. Hopefully you feeling good about this, Dino?
Very good. I'm...
Very good. All right.
Great.
Then thanks for today, and bye for now.
Yes.
Okay. Bye. Great.